can try and win championships, and that's what it's all about. When you look from the outside and you watch this team, I know we're going to have a real good, solid hockey team this year.
Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson, in this really awesome anime t-shirt.
Dude, banana.
Let's go. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing good. Talking about Filip Chytil, one of my favorite players on the Rangers. That's pretty much it. I'm excited to chat.
Yep. So, spoiler alert, we're talking about Filip Chytil today and how we believe he can have a breakout 2022 to 2023 season. Now, of course, we know that the breakout has already begun for Filip Chytil. The 2022 playoffs, he was sick, 9 points in 20 games. He was a phenomenal player. He had a lot of success driving the net, was aggressive in those corner battles, and he really did put up a solid performance in the 2022 playoffs, playing alongside on the kid line with Lafreniere and Kakko. But entering 2002 to 23, there's going to be a lot of changes to the Rangers lines. Of course, you've got Lafreniere likely playing on the first line instead of the third line, like he was with Chytil last year. But with Lafreniere moving to the first line, Kakko maybe moving to the second line, could potentially stay on the third, but likely playing on the second. Chytil is the odd man out here. He's kind of the guy left behind. Now, there was an opportunity after that great postseason for Chytil to move up to the second line, but we know the Rangers went out there and signed Vincent Trocheck to a 7-year deal. So, no chance for Filip Chytil to really move up into the second line. It's going to be very difficult for him to be a 2C at any point in his career with the Rangers. So, now we're kind of at a point where Filip Chytil kind of has to make a name for himself this year in order to get a contract extension with the Rangers. He either needs to prove to be a very solid 3C or he needs to prove to be a worthy signing for another team, basically, kind of just playing for a contract elsewhere at this point, because I just don't see the avenue personally for Filip Chytil to move up in these lines. But Eric, what are your initial thoughts on Filip Chytil and your take on whether or not he can move up into the 2C spot?
I think there's only one way that I can see Filip Chytil playing on the second line, and it's not even as the 2C. I think Zibanejad and Trocheck are a lock at 1 and 2 for the foreseeable future. The only way that I could really see him moving up into the second line is if, for some reason, Kaapo Kakko just really plays horribly and then gets demoted to the third or fourth line, and they could maybe move Chytil up into like a right-wing second-line position. Because, we have Chytil currently slotted as our 3C, but then we also have Barclay Goodrow down there on the fourth line, and then we also just signed Carpenter. So we do have a surplus of centers right now. So if push comes to shove, we could possibly see Chytil be shifted to the second line right wing if it really comes down to it, and then just have Goodrow as your third line center, and then have Carpenter up on your fourth line. But we've talked about this many times. I really don't see Kakko slipping. Just like how we think Chytil's going to have a breakout season, I can really see the same thing happening for Kakko. So a very low chance that actually ends up happening. But that is the only possible avenue I can see for him escaping the bottom 6 currently.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you on that one. But I'll say, there is always the opportunity that Kaapo Kakko loses favor with the coaching staff again. Now, we all know infamously Kaapo Kakko was a healthy scratch in the 2022 playoffs, 6th game of the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, that was a little bit controversial, but of course, the Rangers, Kakko, they worked it out. He signed the 2-year bridge deal, so he's here for the foreseeable future, kind of just here to prove himself, essentially. But what if he doesn't prove himself? What if he doesn't play too well, right? Then we could see maybe he loses favor with the coaching staff once again. Coaching staff Gerard Gallant says, hey, not really a fan of your performance. We're going to put you down into the bottom 6. And then you could see the elevation of Filip Chytil. Let's see how Filip Chytil plays. Maybe even Kaapo Kakko plays so well, but Filip Chytil plays so much better that Filip Chytil ends up getting elevated to the top 6. That's totally possible as well. But it's going to be really interesting to see how those two perform. But what do you think the odds are that you could actually see Kaapo Kakko kind of falter and have Filip Chytil overtake him? Do you think there's any shot?
I don't really think there's a shot. Like I said, it's the only possibility I can see for it to happen. But I really think there's like a 1% chance that happens, because even if Kakko does start to falter and not play well, like the chances of them pulling up Vitaly Krasov or Sammy Blais up to the second line is like infinitely higher than them calling up Chytil. So I think it would just have to be like a perfect storm, for lack of a better word, where Kakko just plays horribly and then Chytil is playing like Connor McDavid level hockey, and where they just have to pull him up to the top 6. I really don't think it's going to happen. I think he is stuck down there, but that does, I still think that he does have a lot to prove. We just recently signed Kakko to a 2-year bridge deal. Filip Chytil is currently on a contract very similar to that, but he's on the last deal of it. So it's kind of like, if he wants to make money, if he wants to stay on the Rangers or sign a big contract with another team, he really does have to prove himself this season.
Right, and as you just mentioned, 1 year left on Filip Chytil's contract, and that's kind of another talking point that I want to get into here, right? With Filip Chytil, you take a look at his performances as of late, and then you look ahead towards the future. He wants to be a 2C at some point, right? He wants to elevate into the top 6 lines, but it's just very unlikely that that happens with the Rangers. So, could it happen elsewhere? Could the Rangers potentially, since he's in the final year of his contract, use this final opportunity to get something out of Chytil, trade him away to another team, maybe get a draft pick, maybe do a player swap, something of the sorts, where they are able to receive some sort of assets in return while moving on from Filip Chytil mid-season. Now, I do think that is a possibility. I don't know how likely it is because I know that the Rangers do really like Filip Chytil, and he, again, was playing really well in the postseason right before the season ended. But what are your thoughts on that? Could you see him potentially being a trade piece?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Filip Chytil's a young player. He's only 22 years old right now, and he has a lot of potential. We haven't really been able to see what he can really bring to the table because we haven't been able to give him top 6 minutes. So if there's a team looking to make a deep playoff push who's in need of a second-line center or a third-line center, I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't go out for Filip Chytil. And it is something that the Rangers might be interested in as well because, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a surplus of centers right now. We could move Barclay Goodrow up to the 3rd line and then have Carpenter on the 4th line. And, as we've been saying a lot recently, the Rangers are pretty strapped for cash. I know Chytil's contract is only worth a little over $2 million right now, but at this current day and age with this New York Rangers team, $2 million is a lot of money. It's a lot more than we have available right now. So if we do want to add onto our depth later on at the trade deadline, we are going to have to move some players. And Chytil very well could be one of those names.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as you mentioned, Rangers are strapped for cash. The number one reason why they could look to move on from Filip Chytil is just to avoid paying him, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't have the money right now or in the future. They have a lot of players coming up next year that they do want to re-sign, and they're going to have to decide whether or not they think Filip Chytil is worth a contract extension. So I think this is definitely a player to keep an eye out on as we get into the regular season, midway through, right before the trade deadline. There's definitely going to be Filip Chytil rumors. I can almost guarantee that there are going to be teams interested in trading for him and giving him an opportunity to flourish in a top 6 position. But for now, he is probably going to have to stay on the bottom 6, and that might leave some other players with greater opportunities. As you mentioned, there's quite a few. We're pretty stacked at the center position. We're strapped for cash, and we're stacked for the center position. Those are the two things about the Rangers right now as we enter the preseason period, which is coming up really soon. But before we wrap this up, do you have any last thoughts on Filip Chytil and why he could have that breakout season this year?
I mean, it really just boils down to how he played in the playoffs. I've been very vocal about how throughout the regular season last season, I did not enjoy Chytil. I was willing to trade him away at the trade deadline for a new center. But then you watched him in the playoffs, and he had a new energy to his game. He was playing strong, like you mentioned earlier, very aggressive, going towards the net, fighting in the corner to get the puck. And if he can maintain that play throughout this upcoming season, I could see him easily breaking out. Maybe even hitting 50 to 60 points down on that 3rd line. I have a lot of high hopes for him. I have a lot of high hopes for a lot of the kids on this team. Everyone is due for a breakout season. We could have made this video about Lafreniere. We could have made this video about Kakko, but I'm really happy that we chose to do it about Chytil because he is the oldest one on this team and he is the most due. He has the most to prove right now, and I'm expecting great things from him.
Absolutely. I think that summarizes it perfectly. The kids were really, really good last year, but now it's time to grow up. That's kind of the motto here with the Rangers this upcoming season. That is the storyline. The kids are growing up, Filip Chytil included. Now, he didn't get elevated into a top 6 position. He was the man left behind on that 3rd line, but it's time to be that man on that 3rd line, right? The gel that holds it together, the star on the 3rd line. As you mentioned, you think that he could put up 50, 60 points. It's definitely possible. Filip Chytil is a very talented player. Of course, he only had 22 points in 67 games played last year, but there's no reason to believe that he can't elevate his game. And we think that everybody on the Rangers has an opportunity to elevate the game. That's one of the great things about the way that the Rangers have constructed their roster. Very young, lots of potential. Everyone is still growing and developing, but like I said, it's time to grow up. The kids are growing up. So take a look at Kakko, take a look at Lafreniere, take a look at Chytil. All these guys, we're expecting leaps forward from them to hopefully have a successful 2022-23 season that watches the Rangers raise the Stanley Cup. Now that's the hope. But let us know what you think down below in the comment section on Filip Chytil, why you think he will or will not have a breakout season in the 2022-23 season. And let us know down below, do you think that the Rangers should look to trade him? Of course, make sure to like this video if you did enjoy, subscribe so you don't miss a video, and ring the bell so you don't miss a video. Subscribe if you're new. Kind of botched that, but that's okay. But we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and
let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.
He shoots. He scores. He scores. Rangers. Rangers. Rangers.